Hello and welcome to a very special virtual author event at the Poison Pen. I'm John Charles and we are delighted to have with us today four of our favorite cozy authors for a cozy coffee clutch or cozy tea if you prefer. Our authors today are Daryl Wood Gerber, Vicki Delany, Emmeline Duncan, and Karen Rose Smith. And before we start our chat, I'd just like to say we do have copies of the author's new book available at the Poison Pen. We will be delighted to hold one for you at the store or send one out through the mail. Just give us a call or go online to the Poison Pen and we can connect you with their books and many others. And now without further ado, I'd like to welcome our cozy ladies of crime.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good to be here.
My first question for you is many readers like to know who the author was before they became the author, or in other words, your backstory. So why don't we start with Karen and tell us a little bit about Karen before you became a writer.
I was an English teacher. I had back surgery and I was flat on my back for 4 years. And that's when I began writing. I needed a creative and emotional outlook to get away from all that. I was heavily into exercise before the surgery. And since then, I've had a lot of back pain, physical problems, and writing always took me away. So I just kept writing.
How about you, Daryl?
Okay, I started as an actress in Los Angeles, and I did a lot of commercials, and I danced and sang on stage. And when I was acting, I realized that in order to become a star, you needed to write your own material. And so I started writing screenplays. They won some awards, but they didn't make me a star. And when we moved across country for my husband's business, that's when I said, gee, you know what, I love my writing. And I'd put my pen away when I was in 7th grade because of a teacher. Sorry, Karen, but and
That's
so
a shame.
it took screenwriting for me to find out that I actually did love writing. And then I just turned to mystery because that's what I love to read. So I was an actress first.
How about you, Emmeline?
I've always only wanted to be a writer. I studied creative writing and political science as an undergrad. I worked in marketing communications, pretty much most of my career before, but I was always writing on the side. So.
And Vicki, tell us about you.
Okay, I was a computer programmer, and I started as a computer programmer way back in the day. We didn't even have computers on our desk. We worked in COBOL. We did it all on paper. You sent your paper off overnight, and it got, came back. The punch cards came back that got fed into the big mainframe and all that. So I was in the computer business for many, many years. And towards the end of my career, I became a systems analyst. Things were in the computer business. Certainly, things were changing. Technology was changing faster than I wanted to keep up. So I became a systems analyst at a major bank. And my goal was to retire when I was 55. And for some foolish reason, I thought, well, maybe this writing could provide me with some kind of an income after I retire. And basically that's sort of what happened there. So rather than wanting to be a writer, I always felt that, I thought, well, I'll give it a try because I want something to do that I can make money while I'm sitting at home. So the sitting at home part works fine. The making lots of money didn't quite work out, kind of like being a famous actress. But Daryl is a star in our lives, so that's okay too.
Okay, let's talk about the book that brought you here to us. So Karen, what is your latest book?
The latest book is Murder with Orange Pekoe Tea. It will be out August 24th. It's set in Amish country in Lancaster County. My sleuth runs a tea garden, but I wanted the atmosphere of the home and hearth and coziness of that area. I live near it. I've always had access to Lancaster and always visited it. So the latest one is about a fertility clinic that makes a mistake. The hero and the sleuth.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a message from our technical person to pause. Sorry, ladies.
Okay.
We're not live. Apparently we're going to start again because we're not live. So I'm going to figure out what's going on. Hold on.
Talk amongst
Sorry
yourselves.
about that. Oh, when it crashed, live stream.
We weren't talking too much yet.
Sure, we can repeat.
Let's finish.
I'm so sorry.
We could reinvent ourselves now and say something else that we did.
That's right. Now that we went through it once.
I was an astronaut, and I've now retired, and I raise thoroughbred racehorses.
All right, got
There you
that.
go. I was a sailor. I sailed around the world on a surfboard.
You just supped it, like the stand-up paddleboard.
My shoulders were just killing me.
But you got really buff. So
I got really buff
Oh, I bet. Eh?
and sunburned. You know,
Yes, yes.
that big floppy hat I had kept flying off. You know?
You probably got pretty thin as well, because you couldn't carry a lot of food on that surfboard, and you had to cross the ocean.
Yeah. I only ate raw fish.
That's
you
right.
left so many hats
And I
behind. There's like a
scared
myth of
myself.
like the woman.
Yeah.
And this is how we create stories, right?
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. What if?
Think
I
outside.
want to hear about the fertility clinic.
I know, me too. Fertility clinic and a cozy. That's a good one, Karen.
I saw just an article on Zoom when I was in a meeting, and then again on Twitter, and it was about a fertility clinic that their systems crashed and they were being sued. And I thought, I like to include some contemporary element when I write. So
Yeah.
I thought that would interest people. And this book is sort of about couples. My husband and I celebrated our 50th anniversary last week.
Okay, nice.
So-
Happy
Congratulations.
anniversary.
What was that, Vicki?
I just said happy anniversary. That's all.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I got my special teacups. Yeah, tea mug,
Nice. I just got a pretty little teacup.
hummingbird.
No, I went iced.
Where
I
are you
went
guys? I'm in
really-
California. Where are you guys?
Pennsylvania.
I'm in Ontario.
I know you are. And
Oregon
Yeah.
and
Oregon.
Portland.
okay, so you're early like me. Okay.
We've been having very hot weather.
Have you?
I don't know about the rest of you.
We have. We've been in the triple digits in
Yeah.
California, Los Angeles.
We actually hit 115 here, which is unheard of during
Oh
that
my
heat.
Goodness.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Oh, I
been
know.
in the 80s though. Yeah.
Oh, you're in the 80s now?
Mhm.
Yeah, that was a real
Okay.
hot spell. for
We are
you.
live
Yeah,
again.
we're not used to, now we're live.
Sorry about that.
All right.
Okay, we're back and live, and we apologize for that technical glitch. Let's start at the beginning. For those of you that may have heard this, just tune out for a minute or so. I'm John Charles, and I'm delighted to have with us today at another virtual author event at the Poison Pen, 4 of our favorite cozy authors for a cozy coffee clatch or cozy tea party. Before we begin, I do want to say that we do have copies of all 4 of the author's latest books available or soon to be available for you to either pick up at the Poison Pen, or we would be happy to put one in the mail to you. Either go online or give us a call and we can connect you with these authors and their books. And now I'd like to welcome Karen Rose Smith, Daryl Wood Gerber, Emmeline Duncan, and Vicki Delany. Welcome, ladies.
Hello, welcome. Thank you.
Good to see you.
It's lovely to see you all. Let's go ahead and start. A lot of readers are fascinated by how an author gets to where they are now. What is your backstory? Before you were a writer, who were you? And we'll start with Karen.
I was an English teacher and a mom. I had back difficulties and I had surgery, so I was flat on my back for 4 years afterwards on a hospital bed in our family room. So I started writing, and I turned to romance first. I romanced for 20 years, 3 or 4 a year. And then I needed to change. Maybe it was the age, I don't know. So I started writing cozy mysteries.
Daryl, how about you?
I'm still just fascinated that she wrote when she was flat on her back.
Oh,
Okay. How'd you do that? Up on the ceiling? I mean, that's
No, longhand. I wrote everything longhand then. Now you
Wow.
gotta remember, it was a long time ago when I started writing.
wow. Wow.
No, I wrote longhand. I've never written on the computer. Now I use a tape recorder.
Okay.
cool.
Wow. Wow, like Romancing the Stone. Okay. I started as an actress and years and years and years ago, and I did stage and I sang and danced and I did commercials and a couple of TV shows, and I was a gymnast in a very popular movie called Concord 77. It was a disaster movie, and I've made a lot of money from that just by saying nothing and being a gymnast. It was funny. But I learned to write when I was an actress. I wrote screenplays, and from that, it helped me learn how to develop murder mysteries and thrillers that I write because of the story structure. So that's how I started.
Emmeline, and am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Emmeline, but I don't take offense. It's also a pen name, so there's a little bit less personal than, you know, a fight to the death if it was the name I was used to. My origin story is actually pretty simple. I've always wanted to be a writer, and I studied creative writing and political science as an undergrad, worked in marketing communications, and I've read a lot. I actually grew up behind a used bookstore. And so I, you know, hit up that store like almost daily as a child. So pretty simple origin story.
How about you, Vicki?
Well, I started my professional career as a computer programmer, and going so far back that when I started, we didn't even have personal computers on our desks. We didn't have a computer. You did it all on paper. Talk about writing longhand. You know, we coded COBOL, it was COBOL in those days, coded it all longhand or on paper, and then you sent your paper off to be data punched overnight, and the cards came back and you fed it into the machine. So you know how long ago that was. And I loved my career as a computer programmer. It was the perfect job for me in the old days. And then, you know, technology progressed and I progressed and learned new things too. But it also got to the point where I wasn't enjoying it anymore. The technology was changing in a way that I wasn't interested as programs became bigger and more complex, became much more of a large team effort rather than an individual effort that it was at the beginning of my career. So I became a systems analyst, which wasn't terribly satisfactory to me either. So then I sort of thought, well, maybe I would try writing. And I took a creative writing course at my local community college. And I really, really enjoyed the course. So because I wanted to stay in the course, I thought that I'd probably better write something for them to read. So that's how I started.
Okay, let's talk about your latest book, or the book that's coming that brings you to the poison pen. Why don't we start with Karen?
My latest book is Murder with Orange Pekoe Tea. I do a different tea in each book. This book is set in Amish country. Daisy's tea garden is in a Victorian, gardens all around. It's about a fertility clinic, part of the murder, a fertility clinic that has an accident or is sabotaged. And that's part of the murder. And then it's about couples. She has an older daughter, Daisy has an older daughter who's 21 and had to get married. And it's about their journey, plus Daisy's journey with her beau. At the end of this book, a little bit is resolved.
How about you, Daryl?
Okay, my latest is A Glimmer of a Clue. And this is the second in the Fairy Garden Mystery Series. And if you don't know what a fairy garden is like, it's like doll housing for pots and gardens. So you use little figures. I'll get one. Little figures like this that would go in your garden. And then you'd tell a story about these little characters. And so my character, Courtney, owns a fairy garden shop. She was a landscaper. She didn't really like her career. She was working for her dad in Carmel, a real town in California. And so she opened Open Your Imagination. She fell in love with fairy gardens at a Renaissance fair, and she thought, this is what I really want to do. This is how I can make people happy. And she wanted to teach people how to make fairy gardens. So it has tea on the weekends in the patio, and it has a shop where you can buy all sorts of little fairy figurines and even teacups and saucers and pots and plants to go in your planting. And she, when the day she opens the shop in the first book, Fiona, a fairy, appears to her. So this is a cozy paranormal, though I like to call it magical. And Fiona is a wee little thing. She's no bigger than this probably. And she is an imp. She got kicked out of the fairy kingdom. And she's a righteous fairy. In order to to right the world, in order to get back to her fairy kingdom, she has to help humans solve problems. And in this case, it's the murder, in the first book, it's the murder of a man that works in the courtyard where Courtney has her shop, and Courtney is a suspect. In the second one, in this one, A Glimmer of a Clue, there's a woman who plays pickleball. She's the pickleball champ of the town, and she is mean and she's a bully, and oops, she gets her comeuppance. But Fiona and Courtney are determined to figure out who did it, because one of their friends is accused and they know she didn't do it.
Sounds wonderful. How about you, Emily?
Well, so this is Fresh Food Murder. It came out in April. It is set at a coffee cart in Portland, Oregon, and it's set around like a brand new coffee roasting company. My character, who is the daughter of a really kind of notorious grifter, starts the company with her best friend, and once a couple of days after their cart opens, they find the developer of a new building across the street dead by her cart, and he's also someone that her mother had scammed out of a significant amount of money a decade before. And so of course she has to solve the mystery.
And Vicki, what's your latest?
Okay, my latest is Murder in a Teacup. I sense a theme here for sure. Murder in a Teacup. This is the second in the Tea by the Sea mysteries, of which the first came out last year, and it's Tea and Treachery. And as you can see by the name and by the cover, this is very afternoon tea oriented. It's set in Tea by the Sea, which is a traditional afternoon tea house, tea room located on Cape Cod. And so my character, Lily Roberts, owns that. She's a Manhattan trained pastry chef, worked in Michelin starred restaurants and that, and she's come to Cape Cod because her fairly eccentric grandmother bought a big old Victorian mansion in Cape Cod that she can't really afford to have. So the grandmother had to turn it into a B&B. So my friend has come to help, and then they set up the tea house. So it's in the same property as the grandmother's B&B on the bluffs overlooking Cape Cod. And my character, Lily Roberts, doesn't want anything to do with solving murders, but unfortunately her grandmother, Rose Campbell, is a fairly curious sort, and she gets dragged into all sorts of things. And in this particular book, friends of Rose's come from Iowa. She lived in Iowa most of her adult life. And a friend comes with her family, and it's a fairly strange family. One of the granddaughter of Rose's friend inherited quite a lot of money from her late husband, and that caused real rifts in the family. So the family has been divided, but Rose's friend thinks it's time to get the family together. So what happens, we get an estranged family together at a vacation spot while someone ends up murdered, of course. And they're actually poisoned by tea served in the tea room. So Lily is definitely going to get herself involved in this, whether she wants to or not, because she has to save the reputation of her tea room.
Writers that write series are told that they need to develop a strong hook for the series. That's kind of the buzzword in publishing. Can you tell us a little bit about the hook that anchors your current series and why you chose that particular hook? And we'll start with Vicki this time.
Okay, the hook is obviously tea room. And I said it's very much a traditional afternoon tea room. All she serves is afternoon tea in the way that you would get it in, you know, the fine houses in Europe and big American cities. And I'm not that much, I love my tea, I really do. But one thing I really love is enjoying a good afternoon tea. And one of my daughters in particular is an afternoon tea aficionado, and it's a big treat for us. So I really thought that would make a nice hook for my book. Afternoon tea, as she explains, as I explain in the book, a proper afternoon tea is a real indulgence. It's not something you grab as you're running past. It's an event. It's a celebration. It's usually extremely expensive, even in real life, very expensive. And the reason for that is because you have the atmosphere and the fine china and the flowers and the good dishes and plus all the wonderful food, and you're expected to sit there all afternoon and linger. So I tried to bring that tradition of afternoon tea into this book. There are some recipes in the end, including my own personal scone recipe that's in Tea and Treachery. So that's the hook. Afternoon tea. So if you love afternoon tea, and even if you don't, I hope you'll enjoy the book.
How about you, Emmeline?
Mine has a really strong kind of third wave food cart feel to it that has like a very urban Portland sort of feel. Yet because it's set at a food cart pod, it kind of mimics the small community feel of most cozies, obviously, which tend to be set, you know, small towns, so that you have that kind of warm community relationship. And so, and mine, and the fun thing with having a coffee cart is if I need to move it in the future, right? They're fairly mobile and they can kind of create a new community wherever we want to go to have another person die.
That's clever.
That's good.
Daryl?
Well, tea is not the hook. The fairy and the sleuthing are the hook in my book, the fairy gardening, and that's a craft that not everybody knows, but it's becoming more popular. There are lots of Facebook pages now. You can start looking, Pinterest, you can start looking at fairy gardens, make your own. You can make it in a teacup. You don't have to have a green thumb. So I fell in love with fairy gardening when I went to a Renaissance fair. And I thought, wouldn't this be unusual? Because there are no mysteries with a fairy. There are mysteries with witches and goblins and skeletons as sidekicks, and even shades, which are ghosts that sort of have 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the grave. But there's no fairy. And so I sent it off to my agent saying, what do you think? And he went, I don't think so. But it's found a really good audience. So I'm really pleased that he was wrong. It's lighthearted, and yes, there's always a murder in it, but it is about the fairy gardening. Like I said, we do serve teas on the weekend because I'm known as a culinary mystery author, because my other books had cheese and then cookbooks. I have recipes in this because I do think that my readers want to have some recipes. So they're mostly tea type recipes. I have a scone, I have a raspberry scone. I have a savory scone. I have some cookies. I have this cute little chocolate cookie that's just yummy. That's in one. So so I do have recipes in them, but the hook is definitely the fairy gardening and the fairy.
How about you, Karen?
My hook is the tea garden, and it's not just afternoon tea. She has that a few times a week, but it's tea and go, and lots of pastries and scones and muffins and that type of thing. I do original recipes in every book, and my husband has to make them after I develop the recipe, so I know everybody can make them. It works out. Family relationships are a big part of the hook of my book, and I have ongoing family relationships in every book. I also have Pennsylvania Dutch food, which is a little different. In my last series, I did Italian food. So in this series, I'm doing Pennsylvania Dutch, which is in the area I live in now.
Your books are all classified as cozies, for better or for worse, by your publishers. How would you define a cozy mystery? And we'll go ahead and start with you, Karen.
I had never read a cozy before I started writing cozies. So it was an interesting journey. My first series is a little different from this series, but I would define a cozy as warm, home and hearth, good values, people with integrity, and then you have a villain. And I always try to make my villains not all bad, part good and part bad. And I don't have sex in my cozies. So they're clean. And like I said, family relationships mainly.
Daryl, how about you?
Yeah, that falls right into where I see it too. Cozies are, so Agatha Christie was considered, you know, the first of the cozies. And interestingly enough, she had a detective, but what they were small towns. Primarily, it was Miss Marple that fell into the cozy genre. She was a knitter, and she sat there and listened to all the people in town coming up with all the clues. And so cozies are, like Emmeline said, you know, they're small communities, and you do like to get, you know, the feeling of family, friends, extended family, etc. Very little bad language usually in a cozy, very little sex on the page in a cozy, but there is a murder, but it's very rarely a bloody, gory, horrible, awful, bury me under the ground murder. It is a gentle murder. They got clobbered. Don't talk about it. Just talk about the fact that they died and who did it. So it's a way of just feeling comfortable, and it always wraps up with a happy ending.
Emmeline, and before you begin, I want to applaud you because I think you're kind of making cozies a little bit hip with your new series. There's this perception that they're all elderly on the elderly side, that they're in small towns, that you've kind of brought a little bit of a modern vibe.
Yeah, I did that very purposely of trying to add a little bit of an urban feel to it while keeping a lot of what I see as sort of the tenets of Cozies intact, of like the small community, the minimal violence, the minimal like kind of graphic nature. Although, I mean, and there's like subtle references in mine, but it doesn't dwell in darkness, which is where I sort of think the cozy camera lens, if it might acknowledge stuff that's not good, but it doesn't, dwell, you don't want to feel depressed when you're done reading it. And one thing that I also think that cozies do that's really important is it tends to show mostly female characters, or like the protagonists, kind of following their passion in life. They want to create like a shop doing fairy gardens, so they do, right? And they create a community, and then the death happens and it throws the community sort of out of sync. And they, using their sort of understanding of human nature and what they observe of people, kind of put the community back in order and bring justice back to their world. And I think there's this, it's funny because, romances, people get the happy ever after, and there's each different, Tom Clancy, I think is a kind of stereotypical male wish fulfillment. And cozies have that like live your best life and bring your community into balance aspect that I think is very important and very emotionally satisfying.
Vicki?
Okay, I certainly agree with all of that. One of the things cozy is often defined as having no sex or overt violence. And I think it goes a lot further than that. You can have a really, really dark psychological thriller that has no sex and violence in it. But it's psychologically extremely disturbing. And one of the things I feel in a cozy that almost defines a cozy for me is the absence of things. That there's no tragedy in these characters' lives. Sometimes they might be widowed, so yes, and then they start a new life. But generally speaking, Daryl's going to say something, but generally speaking, the murder itself doesn't bring a lot of grief or a lot of tragedy to the characters' lives. The murdered person tends to be someone that nobody liked or a stranger into town. Going in, there's not going to be any kidnapped children. There's going to be no sex abuse. There's going to be, no international terrorists attacking our town and planting bombs. So that it's within the confines of that the cause of the murder is in the confines of the small community, and the solution to the murder is in the confines of the small community, therefore solvable by our protagonist. And I'll add that I get a lot of letters, and particularly I've gotten a lot of letters, and I'm sure the others have as well, over the past year, telling me how much they enjoyed reading my books in these difficult times, that they're tired of watching the news and saying what's happening and just doom scrolling Twitter all day long, and to read a book that is going to be, things are going to be put okay at the end. Anyway, they told me they like that a lot. So that's why I write cozies anyway. Daryl had an argument. Did you have a disagreement?
It wasn't the argument, but they do face tragedy. I mean, my character in my cookbook book has lost her husband. And in the fairy garden, she lost her mother to cancer when she was 10. So, there is backstory that might be tragedy. And you brought up a good point, and that is that we rarely kill off good characters in our books.
Right.
I mean, we don't kill off the protagonist's best friend. The protagonist's best friend might be a suspect, but she'll never be killed off, because that would hurt. You get readers writing in saying, how dare you kill that character? So, we're gentle with our family groups too.
Vicki, I seem to remember that you did a survey with some of your readers about what they loved and hated in cozy mysteries. And what was surprising was the things that some people said they hated the most were the things that other readers loved.
Well, that's probably the case with everything, right? But yes, I did ask when I was thinking of a new series, I can't remember exactly what, but I asked my readers about if they needed a romance in their cozies. And the answer was overwhelmingly yes, they liked romance, but very split about the love triangle, which is very much a trope of a lot of cozies. Certainly starts with the love triangle. Very common that she arrives in town and, two handsome men are vying for her favors and she can't decide. I mean, that happens to us all, doesn't it? Just last week, vying for being vying for attention. But a substantial number of my readers said they hated the love triangle. Didn't just dislike it, hated it. Particularly if it went on too long. Some of them said they could accept it for maybe the first book, maybe the second, but by then she's got to make up her mind. Otherwise she looks like a dithering idiot, right? And then others said, oh no, I love the love triangle. You know, I think some, like I just sort of alluded to there, some women all, you know, sort of have a fantasy of being vied for by, you know, two incredibly handsome young men. But anyway, so they fell down pretty strongly. I'd say that the majority of them, actually, what I'd say is it's probably evenly split, but the ones that don't like the love triangle intensely don't like it. That was my opinion.
Many people love mysteries because of the structure. There's a beginning, there's a crime, it's solved. As a writer, when you're starting a series or starting a new book, do you have that same sense of structure? Do you know what's going to happen? Is everything plotted out? Or do you just kind of start with an idea and see where it takes you? So basically the question is, what your writing process is. And we'll start with Karen.
I've always had deadlines. And so deadlines mean I structure. And I've also had pain to deal with, physical pain. And if I structure, I don't have to worry about that. I can pick up my synopsis or my outline and write every day, next scene, no matter what I'm feeling or what's happening outside. So yes, I do structure from the beginning. I don't know. I mean, in the course of the mystery, conversations happen maybe I didn't expect, or something different will pop up, but still, basically, I have it down.
Daryl?
I'm that same way. When I first started writing, I did not have the structure and my writing was all over the place. And then when I started to apply my screenwriting structure to my novels, all of a sudden I went, oh yeah, I have to plot this out. So I actually plot it almost like I do a movie. I'll say where the location is, where the person is, what the pith of the, you know, the log line for that scene is, what the clues might be, or the red herrings. And so I put it all together, but I do consider it more like a roadmap. So like Karen said, if something changes, I'll add that to my outline going, okay, let's not forget that you just added that in there, or this character came in and changed the story this way. Because when you know you're going from California to New York, you know how you're getting there, but you might want to go up and see South Dakota. And so that's a diversion. And so in the outline, it gives me the structure. I know who did it, I know why, and I know my final scene and where I'm getting to, but I can have little scenes that give them a little more color to the story. So that's, but I work with an outline.
Emmeline?
A lot of writers talk about that as being like a pantser or a plotter. And I've always considered myself kind of right in the middle. I tend to know like where the story starts, and I know the logic behind like the crime and like why it happened and where I'm going to end up, but I don't necessarily flesh out all the details when I start. I like leaving some room there where I'm kind of discovering some of the subplots because it makes it more interesting for me to write. Although the more you write on a deadline, I think the kind of less kind of exploratory kind of writing you can do. So the answer, I'm kind of, yeah, like I tend to have I kind of have a roadmap, but I want to be able to figure out all of the side detours as I go.
How about you, Vicki?
And I'm also kind of a both person. I sit down and I page one, chapter one, completely blank, right? I mean, I don't know where I'm going. I sometimes don't even know the characters are and all that. And then I write up until maybe quarter of the way through, maybe a little less, at least until the murder. And I find that way the characters kind of come to me, the personality of the dead person, the personality of the guest stars, shall we call it. And then I stop. And then I open another page on my computer, and then I write my outline. Because I find that's the only way I can get through the soggy middle. When I have tried thinking, oh, this book's going so well because I have such a good opening, I'll carry on and it'll all come to me. And then I'm trapped in the soggy middle for days, for weeks. Yeah, so that's the way that I do it. So I'm a mixed bag sort of person.
All of you are currently writing series, and some of you have written other mystery series. The question I have is, as an author, are there advantages to writing a series? Are there potential disadvantages? Vicki, why don't you start?
Yeah, Well, certainly, as you know, I wrote 3 standalones for Poison Pen Press earlier in my career. I also wrote the Constable Molly Smith series for Poison Pen Press, and I got my career started at Poison Pen Press. So I'm exceptionally, I think, very, very, very fondly of Rob and Barbara and everybody at the press. And I liked writing the series, the standalone books. They were standalone psychological suspense. I think you can really explore the character a lot more in a standalone, because in one book in a standalone, because whatever's happening is the ultimate crisis in their life, right? This is usually the turning point of their life. It's the point at which they have to resolve, everything that led up to that, either in terms of, solving an age-old crime or dealing with trauma in their past life and in their family and all that. So I did like writing those 3 standalones: Burden of Memory, Scare the Light Away, and More Than Sorrow are their names. And I did like writing those a lot. But now I'm writing series, and there's a certain freedom as well in writing the series, because I found that I like these characters and I like meeting up with them again and seeing what's going to happen in their life. The Lighthouse Library series, I'm writing book 9 right now. So the character's changed from when she started. She's more mature. She's still I hope she's still the same charming person she was, but she's a lot more mature. She's settled in her life and her career and all of that. So both have real advantages. And certainly I would advise people that want to explore different things in their writing, if they're writing a series, to try standalone. If they're writing a standalone, to try and see what they like, and if they like writing a series.
Emmeline?
Well, my debut was actually a young adult thriller that was a standalone. And so that is the fun part about that is you can write a story that has kind of a definitive end, right? Where you don't have to come back. And when you write a series, you end up creating space within, hopefully within your, the first book, where you have kind of room to grow and to move, and threads you can pick up on. You might kind of reference them, might be a subplot, but you have space to come back to flesh out for your next stories. And it's kind of fun being able to do both. And I think, I would love a career where I could do a mix of standalones where it's a really fun story, but you don't, there's no room to come back, or you don't need to come back. And then you have the series where you have characters that are like family or friends, and readers treat them like family or friends, and they want to see how their lives are going to progress.
Daryl?
Yeah, I'm completely in agreement with that. I've written some standalones, and I've written a short series, just a 3-book series, and I liked that. That sort of had a beginning, middle, and end of a story and a career as a young detective. But the fun thing about series is that you get to know your character more. You can write them a little more briskly, because you do already know the character, the locations. You can go back into a book and go, oh, that's what the cookbook looks like. That's what the Fairy Garden shop looks like now. And you not just copy and paste, but you can go and reference it always. So it's not always brand new starting on page 1. Every single scene is something new. So in a standalone, everything is new. It's like writing a whole new brand new series. It has to be all fresh, and it has to be logged into your brain as to what, and your reader needs to know exactly what they're reading every single page. But sometimes in a series, they get comfy. They already know. Actually, this is funny. I wrote the Cheese Shop Mystery Series, and a friend of mine was trying to describe the shop to me. And she said, the wine shop is on the left. I said, no, the wine shop's on the right. I said, I could show you 5 references to the wine shop on the right. And my husband was sitting there. He said, no, it's on the left. And I said, no, sweetheart, it's on the right. You walk into the store and the wine shop's on the right. And it was one of those things that, because I'd written the series, I did know north from south, east from west, and I knew where all the different places were. And it would have been great on something like Jeopardy. To trick someone and go, so was it?
When I was writing romance, and I've written had over 100 books published, I learned that my readers really appreciated series books. They would buy more because they wanted to know what happened next to the next character. And so it was obvious to me when I started my first book, Cozy, to write a series. And that Caprice de Luca series has 8 books, and it has a beginning and an end. There won't be any more, probably. She gets married in the 8th book. The series now is a little different. I do arcs, storylines that go through each book that concern her daughters. She has an adopted daughter who searches for her birth mother. Her older daughter gets pregnant and gets married against Daisy's wishes. So those arcs go through all the books. That's what I enjoy. I really enjoy doing that. And I just found readers really appreciate that.
Great. I know from having worked before in a library and now a bookstore that when it comes to a series, readers are hesitant to pick up a book if it's midway in or if it's not the first. How do you kind of balance with your current book, if it's midway or whatever point in the series, bringing in new readers while also dealing with readers who've been with you from the beginning? Throw that to Karen.
I try to put a contemporary element in each book, in each mystery. So it's separate from the relationships or whatever has developed. That's my phone. And that way they'll pick it up. Like I said, this one has the fertility clinic accident in it, so they might pick it up for that. One of the books has her daughter's postpartum depression in it, so they might pick it up for that. In fact, I've gotten letters about that they haven't seen that addressed before, and they appreciated me doing it. So each book has an element like that that I feel will draw readers in to that book alone. And the mystery is solved in every book.
Daryl?
Yeah, I consider each book can be read on its own merits. I try to remind a reader of the history lightly. I don't, in the first book, it would have more history of such and such. In the second book, you get a sentence or two about that history. But I want each reader to come to the book fresh and say, oh, I know enough. Now, if I really do want to know this character even better, then I would go back to book 1 and start over, because I really believe that we are creating relationships in our stories. And if you really want to know how this person got with this person, or the either the friendship or the marriage or the love, that starts at book 1 is how that builds up. But each book should be, like you could turn on a TV show, Murder, She Wrote, and you're going to watch it and you're going to know exactly where she's at. But if you really want to know where the series started, you'd go back to the beginning to find out why she, was so curious and wrote all these mysteries. And you wouldn't want to be her friend either, because a lot of people die around her. But that said, it's each book should stand on its own. But I do know I like to read from the beginning in a series, but I will often pick up, the 10th in a series and say, oh, I'm going to go back now and start at the first book. I like this. And by the time I get to 10, I will have forgotten what it was about anyway.
Was that Murder, She Wrote reference on purpose, Daryl?
Oh, no, but I do use that. I do use that. As an actress, I was in Murder, She Wrote, and it was a great experience. But no, I use that because, one of the things about Cozies is that it's the Murder, She Wrote trope. And that is, either you are a victim or you're a suspect, and so therefore you're not in good shape if you're around her.
So
Right.
Daryl, did you die on Murder, She Wrote, or were you a
No, I was a really mean woman. I have moments of being really mean, and I was a really mean neighbor who accused a sweet lady of her son stealing my son's bicycle, and I was just adamant that he'd done it. I was wrong.
Emmeline, you're at the start of your series. Do you have plans to try to keep things separate so readers can pick it up along the way?
Well, definitely, even though it's a series, each book does stand alone as its own mystery. And so I kind of create, like, the second book does have like a slightly different setting because it's set at a music festival. It's just outside of Portland, and it has the kind of the Portland kind of feel, and it's like an eco-friendly festival. So it has a lot of kind of, I would say, Pacific Northwest uniqueness. But it does create, like, I try to figure out a way to reintroduce the characters so it doesn't alienate people that read the first, where they're like, I know all of this. But if you hadn't read the first, you would get a sense of who everyone was and their relationships quickly. And we'll see if I succeed or not. or succeeded. It's ready for copy edits, so hopefully I did.
Vicki?
Yeah, it is a difficult balance sometimes because, like I said, I'm writing the 9th book in the Lighthouse Library series now. And yeah, I mean, how much background do I give to the character? By 9 books, not many, not much, but I still don't want the new reader to be unsure of where she comes from or why her family lives in Boston and she lives someplace else, or what her relationship is with various people and all that. So you have to kind of, you don't want to bore the longtime reader either. So you have to put in, it is a little bit of a difficult balance. But certainly for people that like to start a series at the beginning, feel free. I mean, you know, I'm perfectly happy if they buy the first book of the series. If I'm promoting the 9th book, and I'll often slip in the name of the first book, or if I'm doing a poster of some sort, I'll have a cover image of the first book, and you know, that sort of thing. So I'm happy if they want to start at book 1, and hopefully they'll make their way to book 9 or 10 eventually.
There are lots of fans of cozy mysteries. There are some people that have never read them. For someone who's just starting out with a cozy, what is your quintessential example of the genre? Or if that doesn't work, what is the book that got you hooked on reading cozies? And we'll start with you, Vicki.
Oh, my first one. Difficult question. I would suggest that other than the ladies here present and myself, I think my favorite cozy writer right now is, it's a tough contest, is Jen Mckinley, who's well known at the Poison Pen. Her and Kate Carlisle. Jen, they're both have a lovely, lovely light touch. Jen in particular, her books are pretty funny. And that's another thing that to me, a cozy should be funny. It doesn't have to be laugh out loud, but you've got quirky characters doing quirky things. And there's a moment for a little bit of humor and that sort of thing. So that, you know, brings a smile to your face. When people do write to me and say, oh, I smiled or oh, I laughed. And that's the thing I want to hear the most. Yeah, so I definitely recommend Jen McKinley and Kate Carlisle. And I definitely recommend all the ladies here present.
Emmeline?
I tend to find out, I would ask someone like what they're interested in. You know, if they kind of like historical fiction, maybe I would suggest like Carola Dunn's Daisy Dalrymple series, because you get the sort of, you know, the kind of after the flu epidemic and after World War I, you know, kind of someone figuring out how to move in a world that's changed, and it has that kind of flapper detective, but it's still a very cozy mystery, and it's a really fun series. I like recommending Donna Andrews because they're really funny. Again, all the puns are really fun. You tell someone the penguin who knew too much and they tend to laugh, right? Just off the title. It was funny, I actually did a Q&A session on Discord with a bunch of people, and Fresh Food Murder was their first cozy. It was kind of a younger audience, and that was really fun to see them get excited about an area of mysteries they hadn't really known existed before. And you know, that kind of the book that's a puzzle and that you want to sit down with and read. And that's what I usually would highlight to people, is how much fun it is to read a cozy, and how it can, even if you read diversely, it's like almost like a palate cleanser in a really fun way. So.
Daryl?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I mentioned Agatha Christie. I mean, that's how I got started, was reading Agatha Christie and loving all those books. And of course, you know, Nancy Drew. I mean, I grew up on Nancy Drew. So, you know, and those fall into cozies, but they don't fall into the same as, you know, what we've got going here, which are themed cozies, things with specific hooks. And so I'm with Emmeline on that. You know, you might say, oh, if you like reading about food, why don't you try Krista Davis or Ginger Bolton or any of these ladies here? If you really like, you know, reading about knitting, maybe you want to try Maggie. You know, there are themes that someone might say. When someone said to me, I don't eat cheese, I said, you don't have to eat the book. So, you know, but you didn't want to read it about a cheese shop. And I thought, okay, that's fine. But the people that like foodie cozies tend to like all foodie cozies. They like to read about tea, and they like to read about chocolate and donuts and whatever. Joanne Fluke writes a great series. So there's some wonderful series out there, and it sort of depends on your theme.
Karen?
Before I knew they were cozies, I read Diane Mott Davidson.
Oh.
And that's what got me hooked on the foodie mysteries. But I didn't know it was a cozy when I was reading them. And like you said, there's so many good cozy authors now, and I will pick up an interim book, say it is book 3, just to find out what that author is like. And then if I like it, I go back and I look for more. I have a running list. I usually listen to audiobooks rather than read. And so I have a running list on Audible of the authors that I want to go back to. But yeah, Diane Mott Davidson was the first one who got me hooked.
Everyone seems to be doing more reading during this pandemic period. I'm always interested in hearing from authors what's on their reading list. So what is on your summer reading list this year? And we'll start with Karen. It can be anything, fiction, nonfiction.
I read thrillers, psychological thrillers especially, because I've always liked to read a step above what I write. I would read a lot of the male authors who did thrillers to keep up with technology. But I have gone into the psychological women's thrillers now, like with Lisa Jewell, Megan Goldman, Mother May I, and the author just escaped me, is this wonderful mystery women's fiction book. And I just finished that one.
Daryl?
Actually, this summer I'm reading across genre. I just finished In 5 Years, which was a New York Times bestseller book, and it moved me. So it was a lovely book. I am listening to Daniel Silva. I do a lot of Audible audiobooks too, and the speaker is great. I've done a lot of thrillers by Audible because I love the voice of oh gosh, now it's gonna leave me, of course. The guy that was on Wings. Oh shoot, he was so good. Pardon?
Yeah. I know who you're talking about, and I can't think of it either.
I'm so sorry. And he's absolutely wonderful in doing all the Lee Child books and things like that. I listen to Alison Galen books. I love her thrillers, her suspense. But I've been reading a lot of cozies this summer. I read a Deputy Donut book by Ginger Bolton that I just loved. It made me giggle out loud. It was tasty. And so, I've been reading across genre. It's fun.
Emmeline?
Well, one book that I have on deck is The House on the Cerulean Sea, which it's a fantasy. I've heard phenomenal things about it. I've heard it's like getting a warm hug, like when you read it, but it's also has like a fantasy element of like a social worker with children with like magical abilities. And so I'm looking forward to that. I recently read The Library of the Unwritten, which I loved, and I'm going to read the follow-up, which is I can't remember the full title other than it's an archive, and that has like a fantasy edge as well, because it's sort of like the Library of the Unwritten is a library of books of it's held within the afterlife, and it's books that weren't written, but sometimes characters might jump out of the pages, and it's a really fun series. And I have some cozy mysteries, so I do like to always keep up with what's going on with that. And I really love like Jane Casey and Sarah Hillary, and I just picked up Sarah Hillary's newest Fragile, so I'm looking forward to reading that as well.
Vicki?
Yeah, I've actually been asked to blurb several cozies this summer, and the one that I particularly enjoyed was called Pride and Prejudice and Peril, and I believe that's coming at the end of the year. And she'll never ever forgive me if I can't remember the author's name. But anyway, it's just because it's a new author. She's new to cozies, so I'm sorry, I don't know her personally. Pride and Prejudice and Peril, and the main character is a Jane Austen scholar. So it's very heavily Jane Austen. So certainly if anybody who likes Jane Austen, you might try and look at that. I'm sort of almost like Karen said, I'm really into the sort of standalone psychological thriller that is so popular these days. Lucy Foley wrote a couple that I read earlier in the year. I'm really a big fan of Tana French. Her latest is called, is it The Searcher? I think it's The Searcher, set in Ireland. It's a standalone. She's written series before. This is a standalone. It's a good example of a standalone. Really like that. Jane Harper is maybe my favorite writer writing today. I loved her, The Dry and The Lost Man. The new one is The Searchers, set in Tasmania. Not as good as The Lost Man, but definitely still up there. So yeah, I like to, and that's what I think a lot of our readers do. I like to vary it a lot. So that's, you know, the cozies are, someone called them a palate cleanser, and that's true. You're reading, you know, about, you know, even it's a really good book about dysfunctional families and tragedy and, you know, the world in upheaval and all that. And you think, now I need something different. So you pick up a cozy by an author that you've read before and you love her style, and you know, it's just a change. And then I'll enjoy that. And then now I feel like something different, and I'll go for a domestic suspense. So yeah.
I think we have time for a few questions from your fans on Facebook. And it looks like the first question is, how much input do you have as an author with regards to your book jackets, book covers, and book titles? And we'll start with you, Karen.
On the most recent one, oh, and we're backwards, Murder with Orange Pico Tea, I have the teapot. And so I sent my editor a picture of the teapot and the recipe that was in that book. And that's what I usually do. And any side things that I think will make a difference in them developing the cover. And he usually takes that into consideration. And the fact that we're doing teas now makes it limited as to which tea the next book, the 9th book, is Murder with Darjeeling tea. So the beginning ones had lemon tea cakes, Murder with lemon tea cakes, and some desserts. And we just decided to switch to the tea titles. So I have input.
Daryl?
I get a lot of input. Ever since I was working at Berkeley with Berkeley Prime Crime, they would always ask, my editor would ask for pictures and images. And so I'm very adept at pulling images off the internet and sending them to them and giving them ideas. And so for a glimmer of the clue, this little cat, this is a ragdoll cat, and its name is Pixie. And so I sent them a couple of pictures of Pixie that I have, and then Pixie found her way onto my website. And all these little items that are here, these are all fairy gardens that I would send them and say, what about using this and this and this? So they're very good at taking the input, and I love how they've made it just so magical. So I'm very blessed with a lovely artist.
Emmeline?
Well, so far with both books that I've done with Kensington, I sent a list of titles and I kind of ranked like my top. And there's one poor title. It's been like the second choice each book. But they're all the titles that I've come up with, and it has felt collaborative. They've asked for my suggestions, like stuff on the cover, and also they have incorporated my feedback. Like originally it was a different font on Fresh Food Murder, and we were like, how about a chalkboard font? It kind of matches like a coffee cart's chalkboard, like an ordering board, and they incorporated that. And I thought it's been nice. They've definitely really listened to my feedback and when appropriate incorporated it. So I've really appreciated that.
Vicki?
And my answer is next to none. I'm terrible at cozy titles. Don't even ask me to think up one. I can't. I just say to them, this is what the book is about. Go ahead and think up a title. And they usually do. Much the same with the covers. I don't get much input at all. Daryl and I were talking about this recently, and I was rather surprised to hear the amount of input that she has, because I pretty much have none. They show me the cover. I have several different publishers. They show me the cover, and I say, yeah, that'll do. This one here, I do actually have some input. If you can see on Murder in a Teacup, this is Robert the Bruce, who is an actual cat. At the Women Killing a Crime Writing Festival that I am a co-organizer of, we had a charity auction a couple of years ago, and they were bidding for the right for a character, a pet name in a book. So the winning woman, her cat is named Robert the Bruce, and she sent me a picture. So I did send a picture to Kensington, and I said, this is the cat. I would like you to draw a similar cat, please. And they did. So Robert the Bruce lives in this book. But I did take some of Daryl's advice for the one after the next Sherlock Holmes bookshop mystery. And because it's part of it set in a museum, a historical reenactment museum. So I went online to look for pictures of what I thought, we've all been to those places, right? The big open fireplace, and a woman stands there and stirs a pot hanging over the fire, and then the dining room full of full of stuff and heavy tables and all this kind of stuff. So I picked up some pictures off the internet and said to them that this is what, and then as I was doing that, Daryl, I had a really great idea. I could sort of see the cover, and I've never done that before. One of the scenes in the book, one of the characters sits by the fire and knits. She's the grandmother character of the historical reenactment. And I thought, wouldn't that be great? You got the open fireplace, you have the rocking chair, a cat sitting in the basket of wool. So I suggested that. So we'll see if they take my advice.
Good.
We have a few more questions. This one is specifically for Vicki. Is the Christmas series ending?
Sadly, yes. Just happened to have a copy of the last one. This is the last one in the year-round Christmas series. There were 5. Dying in a Winter Wonderland came out last fall, and 5 book series is not unusual. Look, and a lot of mid-list cozies, 5 books is pretty much the run of it. So I wasn't, I love that series, yes, but I wasn't entirely surprised that Penguin didn't want any more. But that gives me an opportunity to mention that I have a new series that starts on the 7th of September. The first in the Catskill Resorts Mysteries comes out, and it's called Deadly Summer Nights. So that's the series that's replacing the year-round Christmas Mysteries. So please look for that.
The next question is for Daryl. Is there another thriller from you coming soon?
Well, that will be up to a few agents who have it on their desk. I've written another thriller, and I'm in the process of writing another thriller. So I have 2 standalones. I have a set of 3 that are suspense novels, and the one that went out to agents, new agents. Are you listening, new agents? You might want to read it. And then I'm writing another one, and I am in the muddy middle, but I'm going to get through it because unlike Karen, sometimes when I get stuck, I will write the end scenes. I will go and just write something that I know is in the book, even if it's not the scene that I should be working on, because maybe it'll come to me. So I hope there is another suspense or thriller in my repertoire in the future, but we'll just have to see. It's very hard. I wrote an article in Suspense Magazine, just came out last week, about writing cozies and being taken seriously as a suspense author. And, it's I think you can transition, like Karen did, from romance to cozy and go back and forth that way. I know that Jen does that. I know Kate does that. But it's very hard to be taken seriously as a suspense author when you write cozy mysteries. And I wish that they would wrap their heads around the fact that we read this stuff. This is what we love to read. And we also like to write it. We're writers. We create. So it would be nice to be able to make that transition. We'll have to see.
Yeah, you would think editors and agents would be more open when you just think about Agatha Christie. She wrote Miss Marple, but she also wrote And Then There Were None, which is an incredibly dark book.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah. It's
Daryl,
hard to market. It's just hard to market.
Yeah. There's a comment for Emmeline, not a question, but they want you to know that they love that you're incorporating food trucks into your mysteries. So they're thrilled with that. Before we go ahead and conclude, I want to ask each of you to tell us a little bit about what's coming next. Vicki's done this, but you can remind us. And also how readers can connect with you. Do you have a web page? Are you on Instagram, your social media outlets? And why don't we start with Karen? What's next? How do readers find you?
Next is Murder with Orange Peak OT. They can find me on my website, KarenRoseSmith.com, on another website, KarenRoseSmithMysteries.com, on Instagram at Karen Rose Smith, on Twitter at Karen Rose Smith, on Facebook at Karen Rose Smith Books. Search me, you will find me somewhere.
Daryl, what's coming next from you and how do readers find you?
Okay, 2 things are coming next. There will be a new cookbook Nook Mystery number 10 will come out next April. And we are in the midst of deciding between a list of 6 titles. So I don't know the title right now, but that will come out. The 9th just came out in April, Whining and Dying. And then the Glimmer just came out in July. So a year from now, next July or end of June, will be A Hint of Mischief. That's the 3rd in the Fairy Garden Mysteries. And then we'll have to see what else comes.
Emily?
Oh, and you can find me on darylwoodgerber.com, on Facebook, Daryl Wood Gerber, on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, all Daryl Wood Gerber. So look for the full name.
Emily?
The second book in my Ground Rules series, A Double Shot Death, will come out next April. And if you can find me online at emmelineDuncan.com. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and at Facebook. Facebook and Instagram as writer Emmeline Duncan, as Twitter as Duncan Emmeline. And yeah, search me out.
Vicki, remind us again what's coming.
Okay, my next book is the first in my new series for Penguin Random House. It's the Catskill Resort Mysteries, and it is actually set in 1953. So it's a real change for me to have to go back into the day, girdles and stockings and cigarette smokes and smoke and big cars and sexist men and all that sort of stuff. And it is called Deadly Summer Nights. It's now available for pre-order, and it'll be out in mass market from Penguin and ebook, of course, on 7th of September. And then in January, it's time for the next Sherlock Holmes Bookshop series, and that book is called A 3-Book Problem. And it is my version of the English country house murder. A Sherlockian society gathers, it's in Cape Cod, but it's a reproduction of an English country house for a weekend of Sherlockian education and entertainment, and needless to say, things go awry. So I hope people will look for those as well.
And can readers find you online?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I should have said that first. I am VickiDelany.com, and I'll spell my name because it is a not uncommon name, but it's spelled uncommonly. So it's VickiDelany.com. On Facebook, Vicki Delany and Eva Gates is my author page. On Twitter, I have 2 accounts, Vicki Delany, and I also have Eva Gates author, and I'm on Instagram as Vicki Delany as well. And I should mention Daryl and I both blog at Mystery Lovers Kitchen. So people are definitely invited to find us online there too.
Well, I can't believe how fast our time has flown by. I want to thank our authors for joining us today and thank everyone tuning in, and remind you, purchase copies of their books through the Poison Pen, if not for you, for the cozy lover in your life. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, John.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been
That was
nice.
great.
Good night, everybody.
Thank
Bye
you.
all. It's great fun.
And I'm going to say thank you to all of you in case I accidentally cut you off, because I'm horrible with technology. You all did a wonderful job. We really appreciate you taking time to be with us in Poison Pen today. Love your books. Hope to see you again soon, virtually or in person.
I hope we can see each other again in person.
In person.
Yeah, I was supposed to be last October. I was supposed to be at the Poison Pen, had a date. Obviously, that never happened. So let's hope again soon.
We'll all hope.
Left Coast Crime is going to be in Tucson, isn't it? So we can
Albuquerque.
Hopefully.
Oh, is it Albuquerque? I thought it was Tucson.
Albuquerque.
I thought we were just going to make like a road trip. Okay.
Stop by on your way through, Daryl.
Okay, I will, definitely.
Okay. Thank you all.
Okay.
Stay safe.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Bye.